Welcome to Code the Future. Today on the show, we're digging into what really happens when robots leave their cages behind and begin operating in the messy, unpredictable world that we all live and work in, from city streets to factory floors and everywhere in between. And to help us make sense of it all, today I'm joined by LJ Su, Chief Analyst at Omdia, who's going to be unpacking QNX's Inside the Robot Architecture Benchmark report, which captures what more than 1,000 robotics developers are actually struggling with as artificial intelligence moves from screens to physical machines. Together, we're going to be talking about what the research revealed, including how software is now the biggest barrier to robotics performance, the growing gap between what systems are being asked to do versus what their current architectures can reliably support, and of course, what developers themselves are thinking about the future. So let's get into it. LJ, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't we start out? I know we gave you a sneak peek of the report. I'd love to get a bit of a sense from you in terms of what you think, maybe the top 2 or 3 takeaways are for industry leaders.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is the fact that there are different regional, expectation when it comes to robotics deployment. We are now seeing, obviously, I think in APAC, there's a lot more excitement around physical AI, and that's probably due to the fact that China is leading the production and the deployment of humanoid robots. But also obviously, there are other concerns and barriers when it comes to the large scale deployment of other types of robots in other markets. And that probably speak more towards the concerns, as we mentioned early on, around software, around security, and around the general ROI within robotics deployment. I think the other takeaway that I'm personally quite keen to discuss is also on the the software side of things. I think we are now seeing a lot more focus on robotic software. There is a lot more concern around robotics developers thinking about how to scale their robotics deployment without breaching the security barriers to make sure that their robots are functionally safe to be deployed around human workers, to be able to be governed safely and works or fit within the existing workflow. I think the other, the third takeaway to me is the fact that we are definitely seeing different understanding in terms of the importance of software. I think some people tend to embrace open source, felt like that's probably sufficient, and that's probably good enough to be deployed in production. But then there are obviously senior executive and also people who are aware of the challenges within the production environment, who really cares a lot more about enterprise grade or security enhanced robotic software.
Yeah, definitely. Any, anything that you weren't necessarily expecting, any unanticipated insights that you got out of the report when you read it?
Not exactly. I think kind of gels quite well with the wider focus around robots. I think obviously we probably didn't expect like, for example, the example I used earlier on, perhaps maybe physical AI shouldn't be this hot this early, given, we're still in very early days. Even with our most optimistic forecast, we are maybe looking at the rather small scale of our robotics deployment in humanoid robots. I think most of the robots nowadays that we are looking at are still in the AGV, MR form factor. But I think the industry is looking to charge forward with whatever that we have, and that's quite exciting, at least to me as an industry observer and market analyst.
Is there one question that you wish that the report had asked but didn't?
I would probably definitely keen to see within that understanding of software, perhaps they could be, let's say, a lot more emphasis on not just the type of software, but then also, questions around sovereignty, because I think we are moving forward into, we will be looking into a future where there's going to be a lot of discussion around the wider digital sovereignty, and that would include not just AI, but also maybe robotic sovereignty, where you will be expecting sort of not just robotics hardware, but also software being written and developed within a sovereign boundary. And that will change how the robotic supply chain works moving forward. But, that's probably further down the line. But then given how, the AI sovereignty discussion has taken shape in the past 12 months, I would probably expect, more discussion around AI sovereignty as well.
Yeah, no, that wasn't on my radar, but you make an excellent point. You've spoken a bit about in terms of the sort of that push pull factor of the need to innovate, go fast, get to market quickly, but also the importance of safety, security. And I guess I'm kind of wondering, is the industry at risk of a sort of a Jeep hack moment, the way the auto industry experienced, call it 10 years ago, that sort of causes a fundamental rethink of how the industry thinks about safety, security? I mean, we've seen these sort of smaller incidents. I'm thinking as of late, the Serve Robotics delivery robot crashing into the Chicago bus shelters, the dancing humanoid robot at the California hot pot restaurant going rogue. These are sort of smaller scale incidents. I think you'd agree, but do you think we're on the cusp, or in the near future we might have something bigger that sort of causes the whole industry to have a bit of a wake-up call, so to speak?
I think we are at a point where there is already a very deep integration between sort of cloud-based, control system versus what is being deployed at the edge when it comes to sort of a complex robotic system, and kind of does point towards a risk within that deployment structure, where I think it's great that you brought out automotive. I think that we have a few, let's say, Tesla related incidents over the past few years that does point towards the complexity when it comes to governing that relationship. And I would say that it is, even though they are small scale, there are wake up calls that we cannot ignore. Fundamentally, all these robots has to interact with human at a high frequency, and they are no longer, as you said, behind cages, behind sort of highly structured environment. They are now in unstructured environment where they will coexist with human workers and human employees, and sort of the idea that we have limited visibility in terms of who they interact with, what they interact with, how they are being sort of protected or secured is concerning. I do wonder sort of there's probably a lot that we can do here just by simply borrowing what we have done on the automotive side of things when it comes to securing the automotive system, applying sort of functional safety labels to all these different software systems, and then ensuring that's getting enforced across the industry. I think it's definitely what we can do, because fundamentally, I think what we are seeing, at least in the humanoid robotics sector, is the fact that there is a lot of parallel between the hardware and software being used to develop all these humanoid robots and the sort of the tools that they are using. So sort of we should assume that there is similar understanding, similar acceptance for security standards as well.
Yeah. I know we didn't necessarily ask about sort of the trust piece as part of this discussion or as part of this report. Maybe we should have. Do you think that the industry still has some work to do in terms of building and engendering trust amongst the general public as all these new applications, come to market and are in these new environments where people haven't necessarily had that exposure to them? Again, thinking back to sort of the pathway that auto followed, and a lot of the bumps in the road that they've had along the way when it comes to autonomy or whatnot. Are there lessons that can be learned from auto, you think? Or
yeah, no, 100%. So in fact, I'll probably push further. I think the trust issue lies deeper when it comes to physical AI, or rather, embodied intelligence, because if you look at least for autonomous driving type of scenarios, go back to my earlier point, they operate in a more structured environment where you kind of know what an autonomous vehicle would do, because you know you can only drive on a certain side of the road. There are road signs or road systems that or traffic systems that people accept and obey, and there is certain understanding of the behavioral or changes that people that and the system would apply itself to where necessary, because road itself is highly structured, highly mapped out, and then that there is consensus around what to do. I think with robots there is a big challenge, because even we know ourselves that human will react differently in different type of environment given different circumstances. And if you think about sort of robots now being required to operate in a human environment, when being faced even with the same problem, they might have different choices because they are being programmed to prioritize different things depending on their behavior. And I think to gain trust within the industry means that I think a lot of the decision making needs to be transparent. I think we probably need to have a certain agreement within either the decision-making framework or sort of decision flows that goes into all these robots. And there's something that we are not being sort of, or rather we're not being exposed to, or we haven't seen yet. And to think that this needs to apply to multiple scenarios, because we are not just talking about robots on factory floors or in warehouses. Now robots are also in, let's say, retail stores, or they are serving as concierge at the hospitality venue, or they will be deployed in kitchens or sort of F&B stores. And all those places will have very different, let's say, etiquettes or manner requirements, or sort of different type of situations that the robot needs to react to. So there are sort of, I think, the challenges kind of compound and multiply if you think about it, and that I think creates a lot of challenge when it comes to instilling trust.
Yeah, no, I mean, it didn't even occur to me, but you're right. When you think about the road to autonomy, a lot of the discussion is around those corner cases. And yet when you sort of apply the same logic to the robotics space, the number of corner cases, when you talk about all these different environments, it's exponential. Versus just, a vehicle on a road, right? So one of the stats that really jumped out to me, again, was around physical AI. 89% of robotics developers say it's a top priority, but only a small minority, 29%, are very confident that these same systems can make safe decisions. That's a fairly significant gap. I mean, why do you think that is? They recognize it as a very important path, of their systems for the future, and yet they don't have that confidence yet, right?
I think it speaks towards how complex the use cases that we are expecting all these humanoid robots or quadrupeds to address. Because traditionally, if you pull back the discussion around robotics, if you look at how robots evolve over the past, let's say, 80 years, we started with very simple, stationary robotics arms that are really good at doing repetitive, highly controlled tasks at a fixed location. And even that, we are putting them behind cages, on the assembly lines that, far away from human reach. And the idea is that we really do not want either people to interfere with the robotics operation, or more importantly, don't want the robots to mistaken human as sort of objects that they can push over. So the idea was to segregate robotics operation with human operation as much as possible. And you move forward, we are starting to see a lot more adoption around mobile robots, be it AGV or AMR, which kind of operates more and more alongside human, but then they are still kind of being bounded in a certain structured environment, in a certain secluded area within a warehouse or on a factory line. And their idea is also the same, just do one task really, really well and try to be as minimal as possible when it comes to complex decision making. And all of a sudden, because of advancement in AI, we are now seeing obviously the explosive sort of growth or expectation around what a humanoid robotic system can do. But then at the same time, we are underestimating sort of the complexity in developing those robotic systems to begin with, and then supporting the type of use cases that they have to deal with, because now you are seeing robots now being deployed in almost as a human, doing human tasks, but then requiring them to make human level decisions, which were not traditionally being expected out of a robotic system. If you think of what a stationary robotics arm needs to do, or what a Roomba needs to do when cleaning your house, it's rather straightforward. It's probably a bit of a spatial computing plus navigation and obstacle avoidance, and a little bit of sort of SLAM. But then there is, when it comes to humanoid robotics, it has to do all of that, but then at the same time being able to make human level complex decisions.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's really sort of a compounding complexity if you look at it.
Yeah.
And that is not, at least the current systems are not well designed for that.
Yeah. No small task. And I guess, I mean, I'd love to get a sense from you in terms of the various industries. Are there particular ones that I guess you feel are better placed to lead in this area, given the complexities involved, where you think that mass adoption, that mass acceptance, the trust is an easier path, as opposed to others where, it might be a little bit more difficult to engender?
Would you sort of, if I may ask you back, like, would you, is that just inclusive of everything? So inclusive of the traditional robots and humanoid robots, or this is more sort of for the humanoid robotics?
Both, right? So, I mean, do you think
Yeah.
it is traditional manufacturing? Is it F&B? Is it medical, the healthcare space? Are there particular industries that you think are really going to be able to leverage these to, their full potential versus others that are really going to struggle?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. And then I think sort of use cases where they are clearly defined sort of as functional safety guidance would be the ones that will have let's say the first mover advantage, of the one that were able to scale robotics operation better. So if you think of, let's say, sort of factory floors or sort of warehouses where they have traditionally been using robots, being able to integrate robots in a cell-based operation or on an assembly line type of operation, and has sort of experience in integrating very complex systems alongside human employees. I think they generally are the ones that can integrate all these robots and scale all these robotics operation much better than others. I think if you were to look at, as you said, sort of use cases where it started to involve a lot more human robotics interaction, or is super highly unstructured because it's traditionally been made very heavily by human employees, I think those will take time. I think in robotics, in those use cases, you would need sort of a very, let's say, top-down managerial sort of instructions or directive in terms of how you integrate the whole operation, because it's not that straightforward. It does require businesses to really look at a business challenge and then understand how they can better integrate robots with functional safety, with sort of user safety in mind, and sort of prioritizing the right security features or sort of safety features within those workflow.
Yeah, very different potential outcomes and realities. I mean, you live and breathe this stuff every day, all day. Is there a particular robotics application that you're really excited to see brought to life, in the next 2, 3, 5 years, call it?
I think given how this human society has evolved, I would really like to see elderly care become a lot more, let's say, automated due to humanoid robots. I used to work in the healthcare industry, and it's I understand how stressful that environment can be with the existing crunch around human resourcing, around sort of the aging population that we have, and then the let's say the ever increasing burden on our healthcare system. The fundamental challenge that we are trying to solve within the elderly care industry is how do we increase, let's say, the current productivity and the current support for the increasing aging population without adding significant costs to whatever that we are investing right now. But the challenge that we are seeing is that if you look at the earliest humanoid robots that we have, Honda Asimov, like, was being launched, in late 70s or 80s. Their first use case was to target elderly care, and that was like 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and we still haven't solved it yet. And it kind of shows you how difficult that market is, but that has always been the vision of roboticists when they first launched all these robots. And it does pains you in the sense that for whatever that we have achieved in the past 50 years, cloud computing, AI, edge AI, the advancement in all these edge models and sensors, we are still quite far away. And I sincerely hope that with the upcoming advancement in humanoid robotics, the upcoming breakthrough in sort of AI models, we will one day resolve the elderly care challenge, and then we all may enjoy the fruit of this innovation.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's such an interesting insight. It makes me think about how, again, equivalent to the path that automotive took with the Jetsons in the 50s, everyone was driving around in flying cars, right? And that was always the vision of the future, and we're still not there yet. I had never thought about it when it comes to elderly care and those first visions of early roboticists, but very interesting. Always our final question, you've been in the industry a long time. If you could go back to that younger you when you first started out your first job, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
I think I would tell myself to be as open as possible when I look at technologies. I think we are very much the victim of the presence. We tend to get caught up with a lot of the hypes and a lot of the excitement around certain technologies, and felt like that's the next big thing, or sort of that will change the sort of whatever that we're doing right now. Precisely to your points of the flying cars example, and also being open to the fact that I think what we are seeing right now is probably overestimated, but we tend really to underestimate sort of the deep lying impact of all these technologies. Like we wouldn't have humanoid robotics being where it is right now had we never sort of tried to push further into autonomous driving. And who would have thought that like this let's say breakthrough in vehicles will lead to us now being able to see robots working bipedally almost everywhere around the world. I think that the correlation between all these different technologies thus shows that fundamentally we are pushing the entire stack forward. It's just that sometimes it's not a linear path, it's not a straight path. It can take there's ebbs and flows within the technological evolution. And just to be sort of open-minded, prepare for it, and then you never know. It's quite interesting. As you said, I covered the industry for like 12, 15 years, and when you look at how sort of the earlier days, we look at a stationary robotics arm and kind of felt like that's probably the future. That's probably where we'll probably get more precise sensors. We'll probably get faster robotic arms. But now we have actual robotics arms that looks like human hands that can pick up stuff with soft sensors technology, and God knows what is to come for the next 5 to 10 years, as you said.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. I mean, to your point, progress is not linear. But hype notwithstanding, it certainly is an exciting time to be part of this industry. And, really enjoyed talking with you, LJ, and we'll definitely have you on again and see how things have evolved. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thank you, man.